Hello and welcome to another edition of Lightest and Best, where we look at the lightest and best offering from a variety of knife manufacturers. And today we have a very special knife. This is the Orbit by Serge Panchenko and Gavin Hawk of G&G Hawk. I'm going to let you just enjoy it a little bit. It is brand new. I went to Blade 2017 and I paid the little bit extra money, which allows you to get in an hour or two earlier the first day, Friday. And there were only about 6 of these in the world that they took to Blade Show so that people could see an example of what they're going to be putting out. And I got by the table and snapped up one so that I could show it to you guys and tell you about it, because it's something that you'll definitely want on your grail list, a knife to get. And it's a wonderful knife, so I'm going to be talking to you about it. It's a collaboration between Gavin Hawk and Serge Panchenko. Gavin integrated his Hawk lock, which you see the button here, and it causes it to free fall. He's the mechanical genius, and he has the whole idea with the very forward flipper, the Hawk lock, and he likes to collaborate with guys whose forte is design. And so he worked with Serge Panchenko, who put his design aesthetic with the mechanical components of Gavin Hawk to make just a super knife. So we're going to talk about the specifications to start out with. The blade is 3 inches. The handle is 4.125 inches, giving a total knife length of 7 inches even. The weight of the knife is 3.5 ounces. I have some other knives to compare it to. The Strider PT in Lego is a little smaller. The Benchmade 940, a little larger. The Hinder XM18 3-inch is about the same size. The Rod Olson M4 is about the same size also. The Curtis F3 is a little larger. The Medford Micro Praetorium is a little smaller. The Southern Ground Spider Monkey is a little larger. And the Berger EXK Small is a little smaller. So there are some size comparisons. We'll get into talking about the blade. The blade is the invention of Serge Panchenko, who often uses a cleaver-style blade in his designs. When he made the collaboration with Spyderco, the Rock, he used a cleaver-style blade. He has another model called the Bean Cleaver, which by its name you can tell it uses a cleaver-style blade. The blade steel is 204P, which is a carpenter steel, and it has a hollow grind, which you can see pretty well if you look on it at the end. And it's all the way to the top. The top is a rounded spine and has no jimping. It has, as you can see, a DLC coating. And the nice thing about the blade is that there are no markings or advertisement on the blade. It's a completely sterile blade. The method of deployment for the knife is a flipper. And the flipper is a conventional flipper, but it's put well forward of the knife. And that does something for the knife. For example, most knives with flippers, I'll get as an example, the Curtis F3 here. The flipper sticks out and makes the knife wider, but with the Orbit, Gavin Hawk decided to put the flipper a little bit forward, and so it doesn't make the knife wider, so it's not a pocket hog. It's very thin as it can be. And the other thing that's interesting about putting the flipper so forward, it's well forward of the pivot, is your deployment angle. I'm going to press it and fully deploy it here. As you can tell, you get about 120 degrees from the deployment angle. Very few knives are able to do this. Even the best knives only get to 80 degrees, but this really flips well part of it is because of the flipper geometry. The flipper also, because it is so forward, hides in the handle. So just look at where the flipper goes. The flipper is right here. It's hiding in the handle. And Gavin had to make another flipper. I'm going to call it a flipper. And it's right here so that you could have a handle guard so that if you were to push, your finger wouldn't slide onto the blade. But look, because that's very unobtrusive, you can use the entire handle of the knife and get a great grip and a great purchase. The flipper is hidden within the handle because of the geometry of how it was placed. The handle of the knife is made of titanium. It has a black backspacer that's made of titanium and has a little bit of jimping for a reverse grip. You can get a little grip on that. And it has this one has carbon fiber overlays. They have overlays of different styles, but I got the carbon fiber one. And as you can tell, it has the maker's marks. On the show side, this is Gavin Hawk's maker mark. It's sort of like the claws of a hawk. And then on this side is Serge Panchenko. Here you see the SP encircled in a circle. That's Serge Panchenko's maker's mark. But really look, if you look at it at an angle, you can hardly tell that there is any billboard or any maker's marks at all. You have to really get it in the light to see. So it's very subtle, very understated, and very tasteful. And as I've mentioned before, the blade has no billboarding at all, so it's almost a completely sterile knife. It's just looking at the beauty of the knife. The knife handle also has a lanyard hole, which is protected from the blade because it's embedded into the backspacer. The pivot, I'm told, runs on bearings. I haven't had the courage to take it apart yet. I was talking with Serge Panchenko, and he said he really doesn't understand the lock mechanisms. It's some sort of hawk magic. But he said, wow, if you take it off, springs go everywhere, and you better watch it taking it off, sort of like, messing with a knife that has IKBS bearings. You better have a plate under it because things might go everywhere. And I talked to Gavin, he says, well, it's really not that big of a deal, but when you do take it apart, you don't want the blade fully extended. You want, because that puts the mechanism at tension, you want it like half open in this area right here so that nothing is under tension. And he said it's not too big of a deal, but then again, Gavin's a mechanical genius, and what may not be a big deal for him may be a big deal for the rest of us mortals. Well, anyway, one of the things I like about the Hawk Lock is that you can disengage it and the blade free falls. It doesn't free fall all the way. The detent mechanism doesn't have a detent ball. It has a cam mechanism that you have to push, and then it has a great detent. You cannot shake it out, but as you can tell, it has a little cam, and you have to finish it the rest of the way. And then it also has a cam which is involved in the deployment mechanism here to lock it open, and it locks solid, but whenever you release it, your fingers are out of the way and it falls freely. There are other models of knives that have this. I can think of three. First of all, the compression lock by Spyderco. Here's the Spyderco Para 3, and whenever you disengage it, it just falls freely, or it normally does. Here, let me get it going here. There we go. That's the Spyderco Para 3 with the compression lock. Also, there's the button lock. Here is Rod Olson's M4, and the button lock, you just push on the button and it free falls like that. So that's the compression lock. The other thing is the axis lock by Benchmade. You just pull back on the axis lock and the blade free falls. So I like the idea of a free falling blade and your fingers are out of the way. Whenever you have a back lock, a frame lock, or a liner lock, your fingers are forced to get into the blade path, and it's just an unnecessary hazard. Okay, the detent of the lock lugs of the knife lock it open, and the lug locks against the titanium frame there. And something that's interesting is that it also locks it closed. As you can see, the lugs lock into the frame here. That's unusual. A usual knife, I'm going to think of other knives that have lug locks, and I think of the Hinder. The Hinder, it has a blade stop with these lugs, and it locks against the titanium frame. However, whenever you lock it closed, it has a lock bar internally that the blade hits against, and the thumb lug is not used to lock the blade closed. The Strider also used a lug to lock it open. Here you can tell it's not quite as good because it has titanium on one side and then G10 on the other, but the PT, when it locks open, the lugs lock against those things. And it's the same way. It doesn't really lock against the frame on closing. It has an internal stop pin for the close. One of the knives that actually does do that is the Medford Micropraetorium. You have the thumb lugs lock there, and then they have a place here that they lock also for the closed position, and that's a similar mechanism to this. The thumb stud locks it open, and the thumb stud locks it closed so the blade doesn't over travel. Let's talk about the pocket clip now. I really love Serge Panchenko's design because, as you can tell, the blade goes from, on the extremities it's wider, and then it gets narrower here in the center. And he had that incorporation of that aesthetic theme on the pocket clip too. Right where the center is, it's narrower, and then it gets wider and follows the curvature of the blade there. And it also, for the lanyard hole, it has a little cutout there for the lanyard hole also. So it matches very nicely with the knife and carries the same aesthetic thing. The other thing I want to point out is that they even did milling on the underside of the clip and the friction point there to get a little better traction. So they really overbuilt this knife. I love it. And it fits flat, so there's no hot spots whenever you grip it. It is possibly one of the perfect pocket clips designed aesthetically and functionally. The ergonomics of the knife are great. One of the things I really like, if you look at your hand, you have a triangle. You have the metatarsal heads here, and you have a little crease there, and then you have your thenar eminence, and you have another crease here. And so if you close your palm, you see a triangle that's wider here and narrower here. And because they have a wideness at the end of the handle, it fits right into that triangle of your hand and fits in perfectly. And other knife designers have done this. The Strider with his PT and his S&G models, they have a wide end so that that triangle, look, it has a triangle thing and it just fits in your hand perfectly like a glove. It feels really great. Southern Grind with their Spider Monkey also made a widening, triangular widening there, so it has the same thing and feels great too because it has that widening at the end so it fits like a glove right into your hand. And the Orbit from Panchenko and Gavin Hawk have that same thing. Fits like a glove with the widening at the tail end of the knife. The ergonomics are great. The other thing that it does is Serge has a wonderful S-shaped aesthetic. The cleaver has a lot of belly and has a curvature here. And then on the handle it has the opposite curvature making an S form. That's nice because whenever you're like that, the curve is the same, right? But it feels really great in your hand whenever you have that. The action of the knife is super. It flips great. You just reach your finger onto the flipper while you hold it with your thumb and your third finger. And because it has such a great deployment angle, it just fires great every time. And then the return action is great too. You just pull down on this button of the Hawk lock and it free falls, and then you just finish it off securing the cam there. And it is a really great knife. You guys need to put this on your grail list. So what are my impressions about the Serge Panchenko Gavin Hawk Orbit? I absolutely love this knife, guys. You might have guessed. Are there opportunities for improvement? I can only mention one. Whenever I brought my knives home, my purchases from Blade Show 2017, my boys get into it right away, and my little 11-year-old said that his finger wasn't quite comfortable reaching all the way out to deploy the front-facing flipper. And so for little fingers, it may be a little bit tough, but for adult fingers, I think it flips really easily. But what do I like about the knife? First of all, I like the knife because it's a great EDC size. It has a 3-inch blade and a 7-inch overall size, which is perfect to fit in your pocket. And it's a good ED shape also because the flipper doesn't make the knife wider. It just fits in there like it should. It's got a great pocket clip and a great aesthetic. The pocket clip just conforms to the size of the knife, and it's a great 3D pattern. It's milled underneath for texture. It's great. I also like the lock design with Gavin Hawk's brilliance of the Hawk lock. First of all, because it allows the blade to free fall just easily like that. And the second thing is that it just keeps your fingers out of the blade path. So it's a very safe lock and it's a very secure lock. I like the blade because it's unique, and the cleaver style says Serge Panchenko had his hand in this. And so this is a knife that won't be like all the other knives that are either drop point or clip point in your collection. How many of you are needing a cleaver knife to go into your collection? I know I do. And then I love the maker's marks. You know, whenever I put the knife down here, you probably can't even tell that there is a maker's mark. I have to get a little closer to the camera and shine the light on it so you can see the maker's mark there or the maker's mark there. And there's no maker's mark or billboarding whatsoever on the blade, so they kept it so that it looks like a beautiful knife. If you look really closer, you can see a maker's mark, but it's very subtle and tasteful, all of the markings. And I love it because the flipping action is great. It has one of the largest deployment angles of any knife in the industry at about 120 degrees. So if you're a guy that likes to sit at your desk and flip knives, you got to get this knife. Believe me, you got to try it out. So if you're looking for a knife made by two world-famous designers with a distinctive blade shape, great flipping action, and a lock that is effective but keeps your hand out of the blade path, then this Panchenko Hawk Orbit may be the knife for you. One of the things I need to give you a heads up on is that during Blade 2017, I did interviews of both designers, both Serge Panchenko and Gavin Hawk, and they both wanted to talk about this knife. And so Gavin Hawk especially explains in detail how the Hawk lock works, and so he was able to explain it much better than I do. So I would recommend that you click on his interview that I did with him. Also, I did an interview with the manufacturer, who's the OEM manufacturer, which is Millet Knives. And at the end of the video here, I'm going to show you some pictures so that you can enjoy the aesthetics of the knife with some music. And then I'll put some links that you can click on to watch both of the maker interviews talk about the Orbit and the manufacturer talk about the Orbit. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next lightest and best video.